The garden was quiet the way it only gets in late October, when the maples have finally let go of the last of their leaves, and the ground is soft and cold beneath your boots. I was standing near the back fence, where my wife Eleanor had planted her rose bushes 31 years ago. They were bare now, just brown canes tied to their stakes, waiting for spring the way she would never get to. I had pruned them that morning, the way she taught me, the way I had done every fall since we lost her. 3 years. 3 years, and I still talk to those roses sometimes. I am 67 years old. I retired 2 years ago after 32 years as a civil engineer with the city of Guelph. I have a pension, a modest savings account, and a house on Waterloo Avenue that Eleanor and I bought in 1991, the year before our son Daniel was born. It is not a large house. It is not a flashy house, but it has a wide front porch and a backyard, with those rose bushes and a workshop in the garage, where I built furniture on weekends. And it is the only home Daniel ever knew growing up. It is also the only thing left in this world that still feels like Eleanor. My son-in-law's name is Trevor. I want to be fair to him, because I am trying to tell this story honestly. In the beginning, when my daughter Sarah first brought him home for Thanksgiving dinner, I liked him well enough. He was charming in the way that some people are charming before you understand what that charm is covering. He worked in real estate development, he said. He had ideas, he said. He shook my hand firmly and helped clear the table without being asked, and I thought, well, this one is decent. Sarah married him 4 years ago, in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Niagara-on-the-Lake. Eleanor had been gone 8 months. I walked my daughter down the aisle, and I kept it together until I sat down in the front row. And then I did not keep it together. Sarah had put a small photo of her mother in her bouquet, tucked between the white peonies. I noticed it when she passed me, and I had to look at the ceiling for a long time. The early years were fine. Trevor and Sarah bought a townhouse in Mississauga. They had a daughter, my granddaughter Lily, who turned 3 last June and is the kind of child who makes you believe the world is still fundamentally good. Sarah worked as a dental hygienist. Trevor moved between projects, always with a new plan, always on the verge of something that was about to take off. I should have paid more attention to the way he talked about money. He spoke about it the way some people speak about weather, constantly, urgently, as though the conditions were always shifting and always threatening. He talked about leverage and equity and opportunity costs at the dinner table. He talked about the Toronto market and the Hamilton market and how the real money was in getting in before everyone else figured it out. I nodded along because he knew more about it than I did, and because he was my daughter's husband, and I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. The first time he mentioned my house, I almost missed it. It was last March, one of those cold Sunday afternoons when the promise of spring is still weeks away, and everyone is a little tired and short-tempered from the winter. They had come for Sunday dinner, Sarah and Trevor and Lily. I had made a pot roast because it was Eleanor's recipe, and it was the one thing I had learned to cook reliably after she was gone. Lily was in the living room watching a cartoon. Sarah was helping me in the kitchen. Trevor was sitting at the table with a coffee, scrolling through something on his phone. He said it casually, without looking up. You know, Walter, a property like this in this neighborhood, you're sitting on something really valuable. I said yes. I knew that. He said the market had shifted, and smart money was thinking about how to use that equity productively, instead of just letting it sit. I said I was not interested in using my equity productively. I said I liked my house. He laughed, the easy laugh, and said, of course, just thinking out loud. I did not think much of it that day. I should have. He called me on a Thursday in September, mid-morning, which was unusual because Trevor almost never called me directly. We communicated through Sarah, the way you do when two people are polite to each other without being close. I was in the workshop, sanding a small bookcase I was building for Lily's room. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish I had. He asked how I was doing. I said fine. He asked about my garden. I said the tomatoes had been good this year. There was a pause, the kind of pause that has preparation behind it. And then he said he needed to talk to me about something important. He had been working on a development project, he said. A mixed-use building in Hamilton, near the GO station. The kind of location that was going to be worth 3 times what it was now in 5 years. He had a partner, a contractor named Greg, and they had a construction loan lined up through a private lender. The numbers were solid, but the lender wanted additional collateral to close the deal, and it needed to come from a property with no existing mortgage. I understood what he was saying before he finished saying it. He needed me to put my house up as collateral. I said nothing for a moment. I could hear Lily in the background, her small voice asking her mother something, and I held on to that sound. I said, "Trevor, that house is not a financial instrument. It is the home I shared with my wife for 30 years. It is where Sarah grew up. It is where Eleanor planted her garden. It is not collateral." He said he understood that. He really did. But this was a safe bet. The lender was reputable, the project was fully permitted, and the collateral was just a formality, a backstop that would never actually be triggered. I said no. He said he had already spoken to Sarah. That landed differently. I asked him what he meant. He said Sarah understood how much this opportunity meant to them, how much it could mean for their future, for Lily's future, and that Sarah thought maybe I could at least think about it. I asked him if Sarah knew he was calling me right now. He said she was aware he was going to reach out. I said I would call Sarah. I did, that same afternoon. My daughter's voice when she answered had that particular quality that told me she had been waiting for my call and was not sure what to feel. I asked her directly, did she know Trevor was asking me to put the house up as collateral? She said yes. I asked her what she thought. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said she trusted Trevor's judgment on business things, and that the house would never actually be at risk, and that it would only be for 8 months until the project was complete. I asked her if Eleanor's rosebushes mattered to her. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Dad, please don't make this emotional." I said it was emotional. I said that house was the only physical place left in the world where I still felt close to her mother, and that asking me to risk it for a real estate deal was not a small thing. She said she knew. Her voice changed when she said it. But then she said Trevor was under a lot of pressure, and the opportunity was real, and she just wanted me to keep an open mind. We left it there. Unresolved. The way you leave things that are too sore to press on. Over the next 2 weeks, Trevor called 3 more times. Each call followed the same shape pleasantries. An update on the project. The assurance that the risk was minimal. A gentle increase in the pressure. The third call, he mentioned that if the deal fell through, he and Sarah might have to sell the townhouse to cover what they had already put in. He mentioned Lily. He said the word home in a way that was clearly meant to remind me that my granddaughter needed stability. I said I understood. I said I would think about it. I was not going to think about it, but I had already started doing something else. I want to explain something about myself. I am a methodical person. I spent 32 years solving engineering problems, which means I spent 32 years learning to identify where a structure is weak before it fails, rather than after. When someone presents you with a plan and tells you the risk is minimal and everything is permitted and the lender is reputable, the correct response is not to take their word for it. The correct response is to look at the structure yourself. I have a friend named Gordon, who practiced real estate law in Kitchener for 25 years before he retired. We play cribbage on Tuesday evenings when neither of us has something better to do. I called Gordon the morning after Trevor's second call, and I told him everything. Gordon listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always appreciated about him. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Walter, private lenders requiring collateral from a third party, outside the actual borrower that is not standard practice for a legitimate deal with solid numbers." He said it raised questions. He said if I wanted, he could make some inquiries. I said yes. I also called my own lawyer, a woman named Patricia who had handled Eleanor's estate and who I trusted completely. I asked her about the process of placing assets into a family trust and what that would mean for my ability to use the house as collateral for anyone. She explained it clearly. She said that once a property is held in trust with the right structure, it is no longer yours to pledge as collateral, it belongs to the trust. She said we could have it done in about 3 weeks. I said let's do it. While Patricia worked on the paperwork, Gordon made his inquiries. What he found was not a crime. I want to be precise about that. Trevor was not running a fraud, but the picture was considerably less solid than he had presented it. The private lender had a history of extending loans with collateral requirements that significantly exceeded the project value, meaning that if a project stumbled, The lender could recoup losses from the collateral that were disproportionate to the actual shortfall. The contractor, Greg, had 2 previous projects that had gone significantly over budget. The Hamilton property was permitted, yes, but there were outstanding municipal comments on the site plan that had not been resolved. The collateral, in other words, was not a formality. It was what the lender actually wanted. I sat with that information for a few days. I kept having dinner, kept pruning the roses before the first real frost, kept building Lily's bookcase in the workshop. I thought about Eleanor, the way I do when I need to think clearly. She was a practical woman with a very low tolerance for people who dressed bad decisions up in good language. I knew what she would have said. I called Trevor on a Monday morning and told him I had reconsidered. I said I wanted to move forward. I said I needed a few more days to get some paperwork sorted on my end. And then we could meet with his lawyer and go over the details together. He sounded genuinely relieved. He thanked me. He said I was making the right call. We arranged to meet the following Friday afternoon at the office of Trevor's lawyer, a man named Brennan, whose office was on King Street West in Hamilton. Trevor said he would bring Greg and that we could go over the full project documentation and then execute the collateral agreement. I said that sounded fine. I said I had some documentation of my own that I would be bringing. Patricia finished the trust documents on Wednesday. I signed them Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, the house on Waterloo Avenue was no longer mine to pledge as collateral. It was held in a family trust, with Sarah and Lily named as beneficiaries, and a professional trustee who was not me. I was the trust's protector, which meant I had oversight but not ownership in the legal sense that mattered here. I want to be clear about something. I did not do this to hurt Sarah. I did this because the structure was weak, and I could see where it would fail. And I had spent 32 years not letting structures fail on my watch. I also did it because Eleanor's rose bushes are not collateral. They are just not. I drove to Hamilton on Friday. It was a gray November afternoon. The 401 heavy with commuter traffic. The sky the color of old concrete. Trevor was already there when I arrived, along with a man I assumed was Greg, heavyset, work jacket, the particular restlessness of someone who had somewhere else to be. Brennan, the lawyer, shook my hand and offered coffee. I declined. We sat down. Brennan had a folder of documents on the table. He summarized the project, the loan, the collateral requirement. He said the agreement was straightforward. He slid a document across the table toward me. I slid my own document back across the table toward him. Brennan looked at it. He looked at me. He looked at it again. It was the trust registration, certified copy, filed with the Ontario government, showing that the property at my address was now held in the Kowalski Family Trust as of Thursday of that week. I said, I want to be helpful to my family. I have thought about it carefully. But you will see that the property you are looking to use as collateral was placed in trust earlier this week. It is no longer mine to pledge. I am not the legal owner in the way your agreement requires. Trevor's expression did a number of things in quick succession. Confusion first, then a kind of furious calculation, then something that looked, underneath the anger, like a man realizing that a plan had been built on an assumption that no longer held. Greg said something under his breath that I will not repeat. Brennan asked if this transfer was recent. I said yes, Thursday. He said that put the collateral arrangement in a different position. I said yes. I understood that. I said I was sorry the timing was inconvenient. Trevor said very quietly that this was not what we had discussed. I said no, it was not. I said we had discussed me signing over my home as collateral for a private loan with terms I had looked into and found concerning, and I had decided that was not something I was able to do. He said I had told him I was going to move forward. I said I had told him I would reconsider, and I had. I said that reconsidering and agreeing were not the same thing, and that I hoped he would understand the distinction. There was a long silence in Brennan's office, the kind of silence where you can hear the building's ventilation system. I said I had also had someone look into the project details. I said I thought Trevor might want to have a harder conversation with Greg about the site plan comments and the budget contingency before he committed further. I said I was not trying to be difficult. I said I was trying to prevent a problem from becoming a catastrophe. Greg left shortly after. He said he had a meeting. Brennan suggested we reconvene at a later date. I drove home on the 403 with the radio off, watching the city give way to the flat fields outside Brantford. then Brant County farmland, then the familiar stretch of highway back toward Wellington County. The gray sky had turned darker. It was going to rain. My phone rang when I was 20 minutes from home. It was Sarah. Her voice was the voice of someone who had been crying and was working hard to speak evenly. She said Trevor had called her. She said she needed to understand what had happened. I told her. All of it: Gordon's inquiries, Patricia's advice, the trust, the meeting. I told her about the lender's history and the site plan comments and the budget concerns on Greg's previous projects. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You put my name in the trust." I said yes. I said hers and Lily's. I said the house was still going to be theirs eventually, the way it always was going to be. I just needed to make sure it got there intact. She cried then, properly. Not the controlled voice, but the real one. I pulled into a gas station outside Paris and sat in the parking lot with the engine running and let her cry. I did not say it was going to be fine, because I did not know that. I said I loved her. I said her mother would have done the same thing, probably faster and with less paperwork. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. I said I was not trying to blow up her marriage. I said I was trying to make sure that whatever happened with Trevor's project, she and Lily would have ground to stand on. I said that was the only thing I had been trying to do. There is a chapter still being written in this story. Sarah and Trevor are in counseling now, working through things that were apparently bigger than the collateral issue, things that had been there for a while. I do not know where it lands. I hope they find their way, for Lily's sake and for Sarah's sake. But I know that my daughter now knows exactly where her and her daughter's financial security stands, and that it does not depend on a private lender in Hamilton. The bookcase I built for Lily is in her room. Pink curtains, white shelves, a row of board books along the bottom, and a stuffed rabbit named Gerald on top. I delivered it the week after the meeting in Hamilton, on a Saturday when Trevor was not home, and Lily helped me carry the stuffed rabbit up the stairs and place him on the top shelf with great ceremony. I kept working in the garden into November, the way Eleanor always had. I wrapped the rose canes in burlap for the winter, the way she showed me. I cleared the last of the dead annuals from the beds along the fence. I poured myself a coffee and stood on the back porch in my winter coat and looked at the yard. The house is still here. I do not know how much time I have left in it. That is a question I try not to let myself dwell on. But I know that when I am gone, it will go to Sarah and to Lily, the way Eleanor and I always intended. Not to a private lender, not as a line on someone's risk assessment, to my daughter and my granddaughter, free and clear. Eleanor's roses will bloom again in May. They always do. I suppose that is the only thing I was ever really trying to protect.